Using emoji can change the tone, meaning, and effects of a message, but it turns out that using emoji can also decrease your credibility. I dug into some research about how emoji can affect our perceptions, and I'm going to break down a few fascinating studies that explored 4 key factors that explain why using a certain number of emojis can decrease the credibility of a message. But what I didn't expect to learn is that even though emojis are simple icons, they work on a deep psychological level, and they can also have very positive effects. These simple characters perform important functions in our modern, very online society. Emoji help communicate emotional nuance in messages that could be ambiguous. Emoji can be used to clarify meanings by serving as simple illustrations of concepts. We use emoji to flirt. They can be used to show that a text message is a joke or should be taken sarcastically. They're also just used for fun. So how can something that has so many positive, genuinely helpful uses lead to a negative outcome? And does using emojis in these ways decrease our credibility? To answer these questions, let's look at 4 key factors related to credibility and emoji use. The first factor is the socio-emotional effects. This means how using emoji affects someone's emotions. For example, research has found that when you send someone a text message that has a happy face emoji at the end, the person receiving the message feels a stronger emotional impact of a happy feeling than if they'd received the same message without an emoji. But even though that makes it seem like emojis in messages is a good idea, the actual answer is that it depends a lot on the context. In one study of how people perceive brand use of emojis, researchers found that when a brand makes a social media post, replies on social media, or announces a product on social media, people feel emojis are appropriate. But when replying to a customer service request or putting out a recall announcement, using emojis is inappropriate. So how do we know if it's helpful or harmful to use an emoji or not? Here's a study that directly examined credibility and emoji use. Research participants had to make a reservation at a restaurant. When they made the request, they got one of 4 possible answers: a table confirmation message with a happy face emoji, a message saying no tables were available with a sad face emoji, or the same messages but with no emojis at all. The results of this study were that the people who received the messages with the emojis felt the restaurant was less formal, more modern, and more competent. This is super interesting because a different study found that using smiley face emojis on a restaurant menu or in restaurant marketing materials has a negative effect. It makes people think of fast food and poor health standards. So why is a face emoji in a reservation message okay, but a face emoji on a menu is harmful? Could there be yet another emotional factor at work here? Maybe. Yet another study of emoji looked into how timing of messages can affect our perceptions. Because face emoji often act as a kind of stand-in for human facial expressions, when we text using emojis, it mimics the back and forth experience of sharing information and then seeing a reaction in another person, more so than text-only messages. This can increase the perceptions of empathy, which may affect perceived competence or credibility. The emotional component to emojis runs very deep, but these studies at least help us see that using one emoji in certain ways doesn't necessarily damage our credibility. So let's dig into the other factors at work here. The second factor affecting trust levels is source credibility. This means how much you trust whoever's giving you the message. For healthcare information, you're much more likely to trust an established doctor's advice than a young fashion influencer, right? And the reverse is also true. We'd probably prefer to receive style advice from a person with expertise in fashion. So we take our sources into consideration when we read information, and that extends to the use of emojis in messages. We've already seen some examples of how research has shown that brands can use emojis very effectively to do things like help launch products. So clearly, use of emojis in official messaging channels isn't entirely negative. A study of emojis in tourism-related posts on Instagram found that using a positive face emoji in the captions of posts triggered viewers' travel intentions. Viewers were also more likely to like posts with a positive face emoji icon than posts that did not have a positive face emoji. So even if these emoji uses did damage the source's credibility in some way, it wasn't enough for consumers not to engage with the brands. So how many emojis does it take then before we see a net negative effect on trust levels? This takes us to the third factor, fluency of perception. To understand a message, of course we need to know the words in the language, right? We also need to understand any emoji used. And research has shown that the more familiar the content is, the more likely we are to believe it's true, which is a fascinating topic all on its own. But another layer to this factor is our physical ability to perceive the message. Look at this text. It's easy to read because there's lots of contrast between the text and the background, right? The colors are very different, so we can easily see where the text starts and ends. Compare that to this text and background combination. Now, the message is very hard to read, right? This means our fluency has decreased. We cannot perceive the message fluently anymore, and this leads to decreased credibility. If we can't physically see a message or interpret a message clearly, it decreases our trust in the content. So how does this relate to emoji use? Well, take a look at these two dating app bios. At a glance, which one is easier for you to understand? When we see a string of emoji all together, we have to slow down and look at each individual character to discern the meaning and understand the relationship between the icons and the words. One study about emoji positioning found that sentences that included an emoji in place of a word took longer to read. This decreases fluency, and because of this, the credibility of the message may also decrease. Here's an insane example. In 2015, Chevrolet issued a press release for a new car, and the press release was written entirely in emoji. It was a disaster because people couldn't easily understand it. They had to reissue the press release with a translation of the emoji press release, which hurt their credibility and their marketing efforts. In one more study, researchers looked at the difference between emojis that replace a word and emojis that emphasize the meaning of a word. They found that replacing emojis create more ambiguity because people don't know exactly what that word is supposed to be. In the emoji that reiterates the word for emphasis, though, the message was actually less ambiguous and more persuasive. This example ties wonderfully into our final key point for understanding the study of emoji quantity we're about to look at: persuasive mechanisms. This means things that are used to try to persuade you of something. You know how as you grow up, you start to become aware of salespeople approaching you to try to get you to buy something or do something? As we age, we learn to identify these types of interactions and how to deal with them. But what's super interesting is that as soon as we perceive that someone's trying to persuade us of something, we feel a reaction, and that reaction is we're losing our freedom of choice. And now, I want to thank the sponsor of this video for making this episode possible. Just kidding. But did you feel that shift in your emotions? That's what I'm talking about. You feel like the thing you were just doing is now less under your control. And this can make us feel angry and less receptive to the message, which decreases the credibility of the message overall. Interesting, yeah? So how does this one relate to emoji use? Emoji use can signify someone trying to persuade you of something. They can make you feel like you're being sold to, or that someone is trying to guide your decision-making in some way, which can trigger negative feelings. But how many emojis does it take to trigger those feelings? At last, let's look at the study findings. To conduct the study on emoji quantities and credibility, the researchers did 3 rounds of tests. In each one, they created 2 fictional organizations, one formal and one informal. They made 3 fake Facebook posts for each organization, and each post had the same message but with 3 levels of emoji use. One with no emoji, one with medium, 6 or 7 emoji, and one with lots of emoji, 20 plus. From test 1 to test 2, the researchers just changed the topic and fictional organizations of the posts. In test round 3, they added a question about the persuasive nature of emojis. Here's what they found. 1. Does using lots of emoji affect our understanding of a message? In test 1, there wasn't a significant relationship between emoji and knowledge retention. However, in tests 2 and 3, there were significant differences. Posts with 20 plus emojis saw decreased information retention. 2. Does using lots of emoji affect the credibility of the message? In all test rounds, the researchers found that emojis significantly affected message credibility. Posts with no emojis were most credible, posts with medium emoji were less credible than posts with no emojis, and posts with many emojis were least credible. 3. Does using lots of emojis affect the credibility of the source? In all test rounds, the researchers found that yes, sources of posts with no emojis were found to be more trustworthy than sources of posts with medium or many emojis. More emojis meant less credible. 4. Do our perceptions change depending on the source? In test 1, there was no significant difference between sources, but in test 2 and test 3, the source did seem to matter a lot. The formal sources were considered more credible than the informal sources. And in test round 3, the researchers asked, does credibility decrease because people feel like emojis are being used to try to persuade them? And they found that yes, there were significant differences regarding perceived persuasive intent in posts with many emojis, suggesting that using lots of emojis triggers negative feelings, and this overall decreases message credibility. So what can we take from this? How many emojis does it take before your credibility is impacted? The study doesn't give us a direct answer, but if I had to guess based on this study and previous studies about brand emoji use, it seems like like if you want to be safe, you should use no more than 1, maybe 2 emoji, and you should make sure that the emoji you do use are relevant to your message. The emoji also shouldn't be used to replace a word. This study suggested that 6 or more means you definitely lose credibility, you run the risk of making your message harder to understand, and your credibility as a source is impacted. That's a lot of risk for just a few characters. But the real answer could be that 3, 4, or 5 emojis are safe to use. The researchers said they looked at only large numbers of emojis in this study because previous studies look at only small numbers. So more research still needs to be done about using 2 to 5 emoji, for example. Other limitations include things like having preconceived notions about Facebook as a platform. Another big one is that we all have pre-existing relationships with people and publishers online that we interact with every day, and it's very difficult to test with consideration for those pre-existing levels of trust, but that's something researchers might be able to tackle in the future. So will knowing this information change the way you communicate online? I think if you're a marketer or a creator, it's extremely useful. If you're just writing to your friends and family, do you think the same findings are relevant? These studies show us a fascinating intersection between language, psychology, technology, and communication. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like because it really does help the channel, and subscribe for more videos like this. See you next time.